Millionaire had to marry Maid black woman in a week to keep his fortune. But when he met an activist, throughout the video, viewers are treated to a rich tapestry of emotions and conflicts. The millionaire's interactions with both the maid and the activist highlight the complexities of human relationships and the power of understanding and empathy. As the week progresses, alliances are formed and surprising revelations unfold, keeping audiences on the edge of their seats. We'd love to hear if you're excited about this story. If you had a good time watching the video, go ahead and press 1. If that's not the case, just press 0. Your feedback truly motivates me to collect more heartwarming and significant stories. Behind the shimmering skyscrapers of Miami lies a story of unexpected alliances, impossible choices, and a race against time. Ethan Lancaster, a millionaire CEO with everything to lose, is handed an ultimatum that could change his life forever. Marry within a week or watch his empire crumble. But when a humble maid and a fiery activist enter his world, what begins as a calculated plan unravels into something far more complicated and far more dangerous. What would you risk to hold on to your fortune or to find something real? The gentle hum of the Miami skyline filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lancaster Tower's penthouse office. Ethan Lancaster, a man defined by sharp suits and sharper ambitions, sat behind his desk, his piercing blue eyes scanning the city below. He was untouchable, or so he thought. Ethan, his lawyer, Nathan Prescott, said cautiously from across the room, breaking the silence. Nathan adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, glancing at the document in his hands as though it might burst into flames. "I need you to stay calm." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "Just spit it out, Nathan." Nathan sighed. "Your grandfather's will contains conditions." The air in the room seemed to chill. Arthur Lancaster had been a towering figure in Ethan's life, a self-made billionaire whose ideals often clashed with Ethan's unyielding focus on profits and power. Ethan's hands rested on the leather armrests of his chair, his fingers curling into fists. "What kind of conditions?" Nathan hesitated, the weight of the news evident in his posture. "To inherit the Lancaster fortune and maintain control of the company, you must marry." Ethan's expression froze, his brows knitting together. "What?" "Within the next 7 days," Nathan finished, his voice almost apologetic. "If you fail to do so, the majority of the shares in Lancaster Enterprises will be transferred to charity, and the board will assume control." For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic. Then Ethan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "This is a joke." "It's not," Nathan said, sliding the will across the desk. "Your grandfather was concerned about your priorities. He believed you were too focused on work to understand what truly matters in life. This was his way of forcing you to—" "Force me to what?" Ethan snapped, his voice rising. "Sacrifice my life's work for some antiquated idea of love? It's absurd." "You have no idea," Ethan said, shaking his head. "Imagine being told you have 7 days to fix your entire life, or you lose everything you've worked for." Cassie paused, her hands stilling. 7 days? To fix your life? 7 days to find a wife, Ethan clarified, his tone bitter. Cassie blinked, then let out a laugh, soft at first, then full-bodied. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his irritation flickering to life. "Something funny?" "I'm sorry," Cassie said, stifling her laughter, "but that has to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. 7 days to find a wife? What are you supposed to do? Order one online?" Ethan's lips twitched despite himself. "I'll admit, the logistics are challenging." Cassie tilted her head, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Why not marry me?" The words hung in the air, and for a moment Ethan thought he had misheard her. "Excuse me?" Cassie shrugged, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "Think about it. I'm already here. I know your quirks. And let's be honest, you could do a lot worse." Ethan stared at her, torn between disbelief and amusement. "You can't be serious." "Why not?" Cassie said, crossing her arms. "I'm practical, low maintenance, and I don't care about your money. Plus, I make a mean cup of coffee." Ethan chuckled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I'll keep that in mind." Cassie turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. For what it's worth, she said over her shoulder, maybe your grandfather was on to something. Life's not just about work, Mr. Lancaster. Sometimes it's about the people you share it with. As the door closed behind her, Ethan found himself staring after her, her words echoing in his mind. For the first time that day, he felt a glimmer of something other than frustration, an inkling of possibility. But possibility wasn't enough. He needed a plan. 7 days. 7 impossible days to save everything he'd built. And maybe, just maybe, find something he hadn't realized he was missing. The following morning, Ethan Lancaster woke up to the relentless beeping of his alarm clock, his head still heavy from the events of the previous day. His grandfather's ultimatum played on a loop in his mind. Marry in 7 days or lose everything. It wasn't just about the money, it was about Lancaster Enterprises, the empire he had devoted his life to building. Losing it wasn't an option. He dragged himself out of bed and into his ensuite bathroom, the cold splash of water against his face doing little to shake the tension coiled in his chest. Today, the plan had to begin. In the sleek glass-walled conference room of Lancaster Tower, Ethan sat across from Nathan and his sister Olivia. She had arrived unannounced as she often did, her presence equal parts comforting and maddening. Olivia was everything Ethan wasn't, warm, intuitive, and effortlessly disarming. Where Ethan saw obstacles, Olivia saw opportunities, and today she was determined to turn this marriage madness, as she called it, into a game plan. I still can't believe Grandpa pulled this, Olivia said, swirling a cup of black coffee in her hands. He really had a flair for the dramatic, didn't he? Nathan cleared his throat. This is hardly the time to reminisce. We need a solution. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression a mask of calm that belied the storm brewing beneath. That's why we're here, isn't it? To figure out the who and the how. Olivia raised an eyebrow. You make it sound like you're hiring an intern. Because that's essentially what this is, Ethan replied, his tone clipped. A business arrangement, nothing more. Olivia sighed. You're impossible, you know that? Love isn't a transaction, Ethan. This isn't about love, Ethan snapped, his patience wearing thin. It's about securing the company. Period, Nathan interjected, sliding a list across the table. We've compiled potential candidates, women from prominent families, all of whom have connections that could benefit Lancaster Enterprises. Ethan glanced at the list, his eyes skimming over names like Caroline Astor and Victoria Hargrove. The usual suspects, wealthy, polished, and predictable. This reads like a who's who of society's elite, Olivia said, rolling her eyes. Do you really think any of these women will marry you in 7 days without expecting a lifetime of favors in return? Ethan shrugged. They don't have to love me. They just have to say, I do. Olivia frowned but didn't argue. She knew better than anyone how stubborn her brother could be. Fine, she said, but you should know, there's more to this than just a ring and a contract. If you go through with this and it backfires, it won't, Ethan interrupted, his voice firm. Now can we focus? That afternoon, Ethan attended a charity luncheon hosted by one of his company's philanthropic partners. It was the perfect hunting ground, an event teeming with Miami's upper crust, all eager to network and flaunt their status. Ethan moved through the crowd with practiced ease, exchanging pleasantries and enduring endless small talk. But every conversation felt hollow, every introduction a dead end. The women he met were polished and beautiful, but none sparked even the faintest flicker of connection. By the time the luncheon ended, Ethan was no closer to a solution than he had been that morning. He drove back to his penthouse, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and blue against the night sky. When he arrived home, the smell of something savory greeted him. Cassie was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of what looked like stew. She glanced up as he entered, her face lighting with her usual wry smile. Rough day, she asked. You could say that, Ethan muttered, loosening his tie and collapsing onto the couch. Cassie set down the spoon and leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. Let me guess. No luck finding your Cinderella. Ethan groaned, running a hand through his hair. If by Cinderella you mean someone willing to marry me in less than a week, then no. None of the women I spoke to today were even remotely interested or tolerable. Cassie laughed, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Maybe you're looking in the wrong places. And where exactly should I be looking? Ethan asked, his tone half serious. Cassie shrugged. I don't know. Maybe try talking to someone who doesn't see dollar signs when they look at you. Ethan frowned. And where am I supposed to find someone like that? Cassie hesitated, then said, You already have. Ethan looked at her, puzzled until realization dawned. You're serious about what you said last night? Why not? Cassie said, her tone light but her eyes steady. You need a wife, and I need stability for my son. It's not the craziest idea. Ethan stared at her, caught off guard by her candidness. Cassie was the last person he'd expected to offer herself as a solution, but there was something about her that intrigued him. Her resilience, her practicality, her complete lack of pretense. Let me think about it, he said finally. Cassie nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Take your time, Mr. Lancaster, but don't take too long. You've only got 6 days left. As Cassie returned to her cooking, Ethan leaned back on the couch, his mind racing. The idea was absurd, but then again, so was the situation. Could marrying his maid, someone so far removed from his world, actually work? Or would it be the biggest mistake of his life? For the first time in years, Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. And with the clock ticking, he didn't have the luxury of second-guessing himself. Ethan Lancaster was not a man who second-guessed himself. In his world, decisions were made with calculated precision, driven by logic and ambition. But as he sat in his penthouse office, staring at the skyline of Miami, he felt uncharacteristically torn. Cassie Daniels had thrown him an unexpected lifeline, a chance to solve his problem without the strings and pretense of Miami's social elite. She had offered herself as a practical solution, no expectations, no emotional baggage. But could he really marry his maid? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Come in, he called, already knowing who it was. Cassie entered, a dish towel slung over her shoulder, her hair pulled back into a neat bun. Her expression was neutral, though her eyes carried a glimmer of curiosity. You've been pacing for the last hour, she said, leaning against the doorframe. I take it you're still thinking. Ethan looked at her, studying her for what felt like the first time. She wasn't flashy or polished like the women he was used to. She was grounded, practical, and carried an air of quiet resilience that he couldn't ignore. I've made my decision, he said finally, standing to his full height. Let's do it. Cassie raised an eyebrow. Do what? Get married, Ethan replied, his tone firm. If you're still willing. For a moment, Cassie just stared at him, her lips twitching into a small smile. You make it sound so romantic. This isn't about romance, Ethan said, brushing off her sarcasm. It's a business arrangement. You need stability, and I need a wife. It's mutually beneficial. Cassie crossed her arms, tilting her head. Mutually beneficial? That's quite the pitch, Mr. Lancaster. But if we're doing this, I have a few conditions of my own. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Conditions? I'm not just some placeholder to help you keep your company, Cassie said, her voice steady. If we're going to do this, I want to make sure it's worth it, for me and for my son. Her mention of her son pulled at something deep in Ethan's chest, though he didn't show it. He nodded. I'm listening. Sitting across from each other at the dining table, the two hashed out the details of their arrangement. Cassie was straightforward, her demeanor calm but firm. First, she began, I need financial security for my son Joshua. He's everything to me, and I won't do anything that might jeopardize his future. Done, Ethan said, already making mental notes. What else? I'm not quitting my job immediately, she continued. I've worked hard to provide for us, and I need time to figure out what's next. Just because I'm marrying you doesn't mean I'm giving up my independence. Ethan smirked. You're marrying one of the richest men in Miami. Independence might be overrated. Cassie shot him a pointed look, her tone cool. Maybe for you. Not for me. Ethan's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of respect. Fair enough. What else? You'll treat me with respect, Cassie said, her voice softening. I'm not just a tool to help you get what you want. If we're doing this, we'll do it with dignity. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. You have my word. Cassie leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. Then I'm in. The following day, Nathan was called back to the penthouse for what he would later describe as the strangest meeting of his career. As Ethan explained the arrangement to him, Nathan's jaw dropped, his hand reflexively adjusting his glasses. "Let me get this straight," Nathan said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "You're marrying your maid?" "She's not just my maid," Ethan snapped, already irritated. "She's a practical choice." Nathan looked between Ethan and Cassie, who stood nearby with her arms crossed. "This is highly unconventional." "So is a 7-day deadline," Ethan retorted. "Are you going to help us or not?" Nathan sighed, pulling out his tablet. "Fine, but we'll need to make this airtight. No loose ends." Cassie chimed in, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not signing away my rights to anything important. If you're going to make this official, it's going to be fair." Nathan glanced at her, surprised by her poise. "Understood." By the time the contracts were drafted, the clock was ticking. Ethan and Cassie's engagement would need to appear genuine, not only to his family, but also to the Lancaster Enterprises board, who were already skeptical of Ethan's leadership. To address this, Olivia stepped in, her enthusiasm palpable. "We need to sell this, Ethan," she said, pacing the room. "If the board smells even a hint of fraud, they'll use it to take you down." "I'm aware," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "What do you suggest?" "A dinner party," Olivia said, her eyes lighting up. "Introduce Cassie to your circle. Show them she's more than just, well, you know." Ethan glanced at Cassie, who raised an eyebrow. "A maid," she said, finishing Olivia's sentence. Olivia flushed. "I didn't mean—" "It's fine," Cassie said, her tone neutral. "But if we're doing this, we do it my way. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not." Ethan groaned. "This is going to be a disaster." "No," Olivia said firmly. "This is going to be the start of something believable, or it's the end of everything you've worked for." As preparations for the dinner party began, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of impending disaster. Cassie, however, remained calm, her practicality keeping her grounded. The night of the dinner, Ethan stood beside Cassie in the entryway of his estate. She wore a simple but elegant black dress Olivia had chosen, her hair styled in soft curls. Ethan found himself momentarily stunned by her transformation. "You clean up well," he said, his voice laced with surprise. Cassie smirked. "Don't get used to it." As the first guests arrived, Ethan felt the weight of their scrutiny. Cassie held her own, fielding questions with grace and humor, her sharp wit disarming even the most skeptical guests. But as the night wore on, a new challenge emerged. Victoria Sinclair, Ethan's ex-lover and a member of the board, arrived uninvited. Her eyes narrowed as she spotted Ethan and Cassie together. "Well, well," Victoria said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Ethan Lancaster, engaged? I didn't think you had it in you." Ethan forced a smile, his grip tightening on Cassie's hand. "Victoria, what a surprise." Victoria's gaze shifted to Cassie, her smile turning icy. "And who is this?" "Cassie Daniels," Cassie said, her voice steady as she extended a hand. "Ethan's fiancée." Victoria's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "How quaint." As the night continued, Ethan and Cassie faced Victoria's thinly veiled hostility and the board's scrutiny, their every interaction a test of their resolve. By the end of the evening, Ethan couldn't help but admire Cassie's resilience. She had held her own in a room full of sharks, proving she was more than just his maid. For the first time, Ethan began to wonder if this arrangement might be more than just a business deal after all. The soft glow of Miami's city lights spilled across the Lancaster Estate's Grand Hall as the dinner party wound down. Guests lingered in clusters, their conversations buzzing with speculation and curiosity. Cassie Daniels, the enigmatic new fiancée of Ethan Lancaster, had become the evening's centerpiece, not by choice, but by necessity. Ethan had watched Cassie navigate the night with a mixture of awe and unease. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, answering pointed questions with poise and deflecting subtle jabs with disarming humor. But beneath her composed exterior, Cassie felt the weight of every stare, every whispered judgment. This was a world she didn't belong to, and it took every ounce of her resilience to keep from crumbling under its scrutiny. As the last of the guests departed, Victoria Sinclair lingered, her presence a dark shadow against the polished walls of the estate. Ethan watched her approach, his jaw tightening. "Victoria," he said curtly, "the party's over." "Not for me," she replied, her tone light but her eyes sharp. She glanced at Cassie, who stood nearby, quietly observing the exchange. "I thought I'd stick around and get to know your fiancé better." Cassie met Victoria's gaze without flinching. "I'd say it's nice to meet you, but I think we both know you're not here for pleasantries." Victoria's smile tightened, and she turned to Ethan. "Is she always this feisty, or is this part of the act?" "That's enough," Ethan said, stepping between them. "You've made your opinion clear, Victoria. You can see yourself out." But Victoria wasn't finished. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Ethan. "This isn't you. You're playing a dangerous game, Ethan. And when it blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you." She cast one last icy glance at Cassie before sweeping out of the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. When the door finally closed, the silence that followed was deafening. Cassie let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing. "Well," she said, breaking the tension, "she's charming." Ethan couldn't help but chuckle, though it lacked humor. "Victoria has always been difficult." "That's one way to put it," Cassie muttered, crossing her arms. "Do you think she's going to be a problem?" "She's always a problem," Ethan admitted, "but I'll handle it." Cassie tilted her head, studying him. "And what about the rest of them? The board? The guests? Do you think they bought it?" Ethan hesitated, his confidence faltering for the first time. "I think so, but if they didn't, we'll know soon enough." Later that night, Ethan found himself pacing in his study, the events of the evening replaying in his mind. He hated the vulnerability he felt, the realization that his carefully constructed world was precariously close to unraveling. And yet, he couldn't deny that Cassie's presence had steadied him in ways he hadn't expected. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Cassie stepped inside, her earlier composure replaced by exhaustion. "Couldn't sleep?" Ethan asked, gesturing for her to take a seat. Cassie shook her head. "Too much on my mind." She sank into the leather chair opposite him, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her dress. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching between them like a fragile thread. Finally, Cassie broke the silence. "Why did you choose me?" Ethan frowned, caught off guard by the question. "You offered." "That's not what I mean," Cassie said, her voice soft but insistent. "You could have said no. You could have gone with someone else, someone who fits into your world. But you didn't. Why?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. "Because you're different." Cassie raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "You're not like them," Ethan said, his voice growing quieter. "The people in my world, they're all the same. Calculating, superficial, always looking for what they can gain. But you're honest. You don't pretend to be something you're not." Cassie's lips twitched into a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Honest isn't always enough in your world." "It's more than enough," Ethan said, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. The conversation shifted, the guarded walls between them beginning to crumble. Cassie shared stories about her life, her struggles as a single mother, her dreams of giving her son, Joshua, a better future. Ethan listened, his usual detachment replaced by a genuine interest he hadn't felt in years. "And what about you?" Cassie asked, leaning forward. "What's your story, Ethan? What made you the way you are?" Ethan hesitated, his gaze dropping to the glass of scotch in his hand. "I guess you could say I learned early on that trust is a luxury I couldn't afford." Cassie frowned. "What happened?" He sighed, the weight of his past pressing against his chest. "When my parents died, my grandfather took me in. He was a great man, but he wasn't exactly warm. Everything was a lesson, a test. I had to prove I was worthy of the Lancaster name, of the empire he built." Cassie's expression softened. "That's a lot to carry." "It made me who I am," Ethan said, though there was little conviction in his tone. "But sometimes, I wonder if I lost something along the way." Cassie didn't respond immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. "Maybe you didn't lose it. Maybe it's just buried under all the walls you've built. As the night deepened, Ethan found himself unexpectedly at ease in Cassie's presence. She wasn't just his maid, or even his fiancée for hire. She was someone who challenged him, someone who saw through his defenses in a way no one else ever had. When she finally stood to leave, Ethan felt a pang of reluctance. "Cassie," she turned, her hand resting on the doorframe. "Yeah? Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Cassie smiled, a real smile this time, and for a moment, Ethan felt something stir within him, something he couldn't quite name. As the door closed behind her, Ethan leaned back in his chair, the faintest glimmer of hope breaking through the shadows of his uncertainty. For the first time since his grandfather's ultimatum, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this arrangement wasn't as impossible as it seemed. But deep down, he also knew the hardest battles were yet to come. And not all of them would be fought in boardrooms or at dinner parties. Some would take place within himself, where the scars of his past still lingered, threatening to undo everything. The morning after the dinner party began, like any other in the Lancaster estate, sunlight streaming through the massive windows, the quiet hum of the city below, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifting from the kitchen. But for Ethan and Cassie, everything felt different. Last night had been a test, one they barely passed, but the lingering effects of the evening's drama clung to them like smoke. Ethan sat at the breakfast table, his laptop open to an endless stream of emails. The board's reactions to the dinner party ranged from polite curiosity to outright skepticism. It was clear that not everyone believed in his sudden engagement. His ex, Victoria Sinclair, had also wasted no time spreading doubts, her influence already making ripples he'd have to smooth over. Cassie entered the room, dressed casually in jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled into a low ponytail. She looked like a breath of fresh air amidst Ethan's polished corporate world. For a moment, Ethan found himself staring, the image of her in last night's elegant dress flashing in his mind. He shook the thought away. "Morning," she said, grabbing a cup of coffee. "Morning," Ethan replied, his voice distracted as he scrolled through his inbox. Cassie took a seat across from him, sipping her coffee. "I take it the vultures are circling?" Ethan glanced up, surprised by her bluntness. "That obvious?" "You don't have to be a genius to figure it out," she said with a small smile. "Victoria isn't exactly subtle." Ethan sighed, closing his laptop. "She's always been calculating, but this time, she's gunning for more than just me. She's trying to discredit you." Cassie leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Let her. I don't have anything to hide." "It's not that simple," Ethan said, his tone sharp. "In this world, perception is everything. If people think you're not good enough, or that this engagement is a sham, it won't just hurt you, it'll ruin everything." Cassie raised an eyebrow. "You mean ruin you?" Ethan opened his mouth to argue but stopped, realizing she wasn't entirely wrong. "I didn't mean it like that." Cassie set her mug down, her gaze steady. "I know what's at stake, Ethan, but I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not just to fit into your world." Her words struck something deep within him, a reminder of the authenticity he'd always admired in her. "I don't want you to pretend," he said quietly, "but I do need your help." By midday, Ethan had reluctantly enlisted his sister Olivia to help Cassie navigate the nuances of Miami's elite. Olivia arrived with her usual energy, sweeping into the estate with a tote bag full of designer clothing and an endless stream of advice. "Cassie, darling, the first thing we need to do is upgrade your wardrobe," Olivia said, pulling out a sleek navy blazer and holding it up against Cassie. Cassie frowned. "I'm not a doll, you know." "No, but you are Ethan's fiancée now," Olivia replied with a wink. "And appearances matter." Ethan watched from the doorway, his arms crossed. He couldn't help but smirk as Cassie tried on, outfit after outfit, her grumbles of protest muffled by Olivia's cheerful chatter. Despite the discomfort, Cassie carried herself with quiet grace, her resilience shining through. At one point, Cassie caught Ethan's gaze in the mirror. "Enjoying the show?" she asked, her tone dry. "Immensely," he replied, earning an eye roll from her and a laugh from Olivia. But beneath the light-hearted banter, Ethan couldn't ignore the growing tension. The world Cassie was stepping into wasn't just about dresses and dinner parties. It was a battlefield, and she was heading straight into the line of fire. The following day, Ethan faced the Lancaster Enterprises board, a formidable group of seasoned executives who had little patience for distractions. The meeting was supposed to be about quarterly performance, but it didn't take long for the topic to shift. Ethan, one of the board members, Richard Cavendish said, leaning forward with a steely gaze, I understand congratulations are in order. Ethan kept his expression neutral. Thank you, Richard. Richard smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. You'll forgive us for being curious. This engagement of yours, it seems rather sudden. It was unexpected, Ethan admitted, his tone calm. But when you know, you know. A murmur of skepticism rippled through the room. Another board member, Eleanor Hayes, adjusted her glasses. And your fiancée, Cassie Daniels? What does she do? She's a talented woman with a strong sense of purpose, Ethan said, choosing his words carefully. She's not from our world, but that's part of what makes her special. Richard's smile widened, his tone turning sharp. How refreshing. But I do hope she understands the responsibilities that come with being part of the Lancaster legacy. Ethan's jaw tightened. Cassie is more than capable of handling whatever comes her way. The tension in the room was palpable, but Ethan held his ground. He knew the board was testing him, looking for cracks in his story. He also knew they were watching for signs of weakness, signs that he wasn't in control. When the meeting finally ended, Ethan left the room feeling both drained and determined. The board wasn't convinced, but he wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him falter. Meanwhile, Cassie faced her own trial. Olivia had arranged for her to attend a charity luncheon, a casual yet strategic opportunity to mingle with Miami's elite. Cassie arrived in a simple but elegant dress, her confidence bolstered by Olivia's crash course. The luncheon was hosted in a sprawling estate overlooking the ocean, its opulence almost overwhelming. Cassie moved through the crowd, her smile polite but guarded. She could feel the weight of their gazes, the subtle scrutiny in every handshake and every glance. At one point, a woman named Grace Hartford, an influential socialite, approached Cassie with a saccharine smile. Cassie, isn't it? I've heard so much about you. All good things, I hope, Cassie replied, her tone light. Grace's smile tightened. Of course, though I must say, it's rare to see someone so grounded in Ethan's circle. Cassie caught the underlying insult but didn't flinch. I guess I'm full of surprises. The exchange set the tone for the rest of the afternoon. Some women were kind, others cutting, but Cassie held her own, refusing to let their judgments define her. That evening, Ethan found Cassie on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. She looked tired but unbroken, her shoulders squared, as if bracing against an invisible storm. How was it? He asked, joining her. Cassie let out a dry laugh. Let's just say your world is exhausting. Ethan smiled faintly. It's not always like this. Isn't it? Cassie said, turning to face him. These people, they don't care about who I am. To them, I'm just an anomaly. You're more than that, Ethan said quietly. You're stronger than any of them realize. Cassie studied him for a moment, her expression softening. You really believe that? I do, he said, his voice steady. And I'm going to prove it, to them and to you. For a moment they stood in silence, the city stretching out before them. Ethan couldn't explain it, but something about being near Cassie made the chaos of his life feel a little less overwhelming. And though neither of them said it, they both knew the road ahead would only get harder. But for now they found comfort in the quiet, a fleeting moment of peace amidst the storm. The days following the charity luncheon were anything but quiet. The whispers of doubt among Miami's elite began to grow louder, fueled by Victoria Sinclair's subtle but relentless efforts to undermine Cassie. Ethan Lancaster, for all his confidence and control, was beginning to feel the cracks in his plan widening. Cassie, too, felt the pressure. The facade she had agreed to maintain was beginning to feel less like a shield and more like a cage. The weight of expectations, judgments, and constant scrutiny bore down on her. But through it all, she kept her resolve, knowing that to falter now would mean losing not only her dignity, but also the stability she had fought so hard to secure for her son. It started with an article in one of Miami's most prominent society columns. Titled A Maid in the Mansion, the Fiancé Nobody Saw Coming, the piece delved into Cassie's background with brutal precision. It painted her as an opportunist, a woman who had stepped out of her station to grasp at wealth and power. The article included thinly veiled quotes from anonymous sources, describing her as unfit for Ethan's world and unworthy of the Lancaster name. The implication was clear. Someone was feeding the media this narrative, and Ethan didn't need to guess who. Victoria. Ethan wasted no time. The moment he read the article, he stormed into Victoria's office at one of her luxury real estate ventures. She sat behind a sleek glass desk, her expression calm, as though she had been waiting for him. "Victoria," Ethan began, his voice icy. "What the hell is this?" He slapped the printed article onto her desk. Victoria barely glanced at it before looking up, her lips curving into a smirk. "I see the press has been busy." "Don't play coy," Ethan snapped. "You planted this." Victoria leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. "You give me too much credit. The world loves a good story, Ethan, and this one practically writes itself." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the city stretching out before them. Ethan's hand brushed against hers, and neither of them pulled away. "Cassie," he said quietly, his voice tinged with something she couldn't quite place. "No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know I'm proud of you." Cassie's breath hitched, her walls cracking under the weight of his sincerity. "Thank you," she whispered, and as the night deepened, they sat together, the storm of the world temporarily held at bay. But both of them knew the battle wasn't over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and their partnership would be tested like never before. Morning of the fundraiser dawned bright and clear, as if the universe had decided to grant Cassie a small mercy. The event was to be held at a sprawling venue in Miami's Art District, chosen by Olivia for its charm and proximity to Sunnyside Community Center. The theme was A Future Together, a message of hope and collaboration that resonated with the community's struggles and dreams. For Cassie, the stakes had never felt higher. This was her chance to change the narrative, to prove to herself and the world that she was more than the labels they had thrust upon her. Maid, opportunist, anomaly. Ethan had stayed up late the previous night, going over every detail to ensure the event would be flawless. He had arranged for the media to cover the fundraiser, not to exploit Cassie, but to showcase her authenticity and the cause she believed in. He knew this wasn't just about saving his inheritance anymore. It was about standing by Cassie as she faced a storm she never asked for. As the event began, Cassie stood in the green room, adjusting the hem of her simple yet elegant navy dress. Her palms were clammy, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent days preparing her speech, rehearsing until her voice grew hoarse. But now, as the moment approached, doubt began to creep in. Ethan entered the room, his usual calm demeanor a steadying force. "You ready?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "No," Cassie admitted with a small laugh, "but I'll survive." "You'll do more than survive," Ethan said firmly. "You'll own that stage." The question caught Ethan off guard. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because you deserve better. And because us, it's not just about me anymore." Cassie's breath caught, her defenses wavering for the first time. "Ethan, I mean it," he interrupted, his voice firm. "You're not just some piece in a game. You're my partner in this, whether you believe it or not, and I'm not going to let anyone treat you like you're less than you are." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of his words hanging between them. Finally, Cassie nodded, a flicker of trust returning to her eyes. "Okay," she said softly, "but if we're doing this, I need to know you're all in. No half measures." Ethan met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "I'm all in." Determined to shift the narrative, Ethan and Olivia worked together to arrange a public event showcasing Cassie's strengths. They planned a fundraiser for the Sunnyside Community Center, a cause Cassie had always supported from the shadows. This time, she would step into the spotlight, not as Ethan's fiancée, but as a woman with a voice and a purpose. Cassie was reluctant at first, but Olivia convinced her. "This isn't just about proving them wrong," Olivia said. "It's about showing them who you really are." The fundraiser was scheduled for the weekend, giving Cassie just days to prepare. Ethan stood by her side, guiding her through the process and offering his unwavering support. Despite the chaos, a sense of camaraderie began to grow between them, their shared goal forging a bond neither of them had expected. The night before the fundraiser, Ethan found Cassie sitting on the balcony, her gaze fixed on the city lights. He joined her, handing her a glass of wine. "Nervous?" he asked. "A little," she admitted, taking a sip. "But more than that, I'm tired. Tired of feeling like I have to prove myself." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to prove anything to me." Cassie glanced at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "You're not the one I'm worried about."
Cassie, now officially by his side as his partner, is acknowledged by the board for her contributions to the Sunnyside project. She is no longer seen as an outsider, but as someone who has earned her place. The story concludes with a beautiful wedding at Sunnyside Community Center, attended by friends, family, and members of the community. Cassie wears a simple, elegant gown, and Joshua serves as the ring bearer, beaming with pride. Maya gives a moving toast about the power of authenticity and the unexpected ways life brings people together. Olivia, ever supportive, teases Ethan about finally finding someone who can keep him grounded. As the reception winds down, Ethan and Cassie share a quiet moment under the stars. Ethan reflects on how far they've come, from an arranged partnership to a relationship built on trust and love. "I didn't just find a wife," Ethan says softly. "I found the person who makes me better." "And I found someone who believed in me when no one else did," Cassie replies, her voice full of emotion. They kiss, surrounded by the warmth and love of the community they helped uplift, ready to face the future together. Months later, Cassie and Ethan are thriving, balancing their personal lives with their shared mission to make a difference. Lancaster Enterprises has launched several community-driven projects, and Sunnyside has expanded its programs to reach even more families in need. Cassie, now a respected leader and advocate, reflects on her journey. From a maid struggling to make ends meet to a partner in one of Miami's most influential families, she has found her place, not because of wealth or status, but because of the love and respect she shares with Ethan. The final scene shows Ethan and Cassie walking hand in hand through Sunnyside, with Joshua skipping ahead, his laughter echoing through the air. They've turned a once impossible arrangement into a life filled with purpose, love, and hope for the future. For the first time, Cassie felt a flicker of hope, not just for the fight they were in, but for the future they might build together. And as they sat together in the quiet of the night, they both realized something undeniable. This wasn't just a partnership anymore. It was the beginning of something real. Victoria's desperate attempts to undermine Cassie backfire spectacularly. Ethan's quiet investigation into her dealings uncovers evidence of her manipulation of board members and misuse of company funds for personal gain. He confronts her in a high-stakes boardroom meeting, presenting irrefutable proof of her actions. The board votes to remove Victoria from her position, and her influence within Lancaster Enterprises crumbles. Furious and humiliated, Victoria vows to take Ethan and Cassie down, but is ultimately left powerless as her credibility is destroyed. Cassie and Maya's alliance grows stronger as they host additional community events, highlighting Sunnyside's positive impact on families. Ethan uses his influence to secure funding for the center, announcing a partnership between Lancaster Enterprises and Sunnyside to support community-driven initiatives. At a celebratory event, Cassie gives an impassioned speech about resilience, hope, and the importance of uplifting one another. Her authenticity continues to win over skeptics, solidifying her place as a respected advocate for the community. As the tension surrounding the engagement subsides, Ethan and Cassie have a heartfelt conversation about their feelings. Cassie admits her fears of not belonging in his world, while Ethan confesses that his life has been empty without her. "I don't care about appearances or expectations," Ethan says. "What I care about is you and the life we could build together, if you're willing." Moved by his sincerity, Cassie takes a leap of faith. They decide to make their relationship real, not for the sake of the inheritance or public image, but because they genuinely care for each other. With Victoria gone, Ethan proposes a new vision for Lancaster Enterprises, one focused on social responsibility and sustainable growth. Initially met with resistance, his passionate presentation wins over even the most skeptical board members. His proposal passes, marking a turning point for the company. Cassie's breath caught, her walls crumbling under the weight of his sincerity. Ethan, Before she could finish, the door burst open, and Olivia rushed in, her face pale. We have a problem. Ethan stood, his expression sharp. What is it? Olivia held up her phone. Victoria's gone public. There's an article circulating right now, it's everywhere. She's claiming the engagement is a sham, and that Cassie is using you for financial gain. Cassie felt the blood drain from her face. What does it say? Ethan grabbed the phone and scanned the article, his jaw tightening with every word. It was brutal, painting both of them as frauds and questioning their motives at every turn. This is war, Ethan said, his voice low and furious. She's crossed a line. The next morning, Ethan called an emergency press conference. The room was packed with reporters, their cameras trained on the podium where Ethan stood beside Cassie. Maya and Olivia were in the audience, their presence a silent show of support. Ethan stepped forward, his expression calm but resolute. I've called this press conference to address the recent rumors surrounding my engagement to Cassie Daniels. The room buzzed with anticipation as Ethan continued. Let me be clear, the accusations made against Cassie are baseless and malicious. Our relationship may have started unconventionally, but that doesn't diminish the authenticity of what we've built together. He glanced at Cassie, his voice softening. Cassie is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. Her dedication to Sunnyside and the lives it touches is unmatched. Anyone who questions her intentions is questioning mine as well. Cassie stepped forward, her voice steady despite the nerves coursing through her. I never asked for this spotlight, but I won't let lies define me. What matters isn't the rumors. It's the work we're doing to make a difference. That's what I'll continue to focus on. The room erupted in questions, but Ethan and Cassie left the stage, their message delivered. Later that evening, as they returned to the estate, Cassie turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you for standing by me. Ethan smiled, his hand brushing hers. Always. Richard raised an eyebrow. Such as? Victoria slid a file across the table. She's had financial troubles, a stint in court over unpaid medical bills for her son. It's not much, but it's enough to plant doubt. Richard opened the file, scanning the contents. After a moment, he looked up, his expression thoughtful. If we're going to move against Ethan, we'll need more than this. Victoria smirked. Don't worry, I'm just getting started. That evening, Ethan called Cassie into his study. She entered hesitantly, sensing the tension in his demeanor. He was seated at his desk, a stack of papers in front of him. Is everything okay? She asked, closing the door behind her. Ethan looked up, his expression unreadable. Victoria's been digging into your past. Cassie's heart sank. What did she find? Nothing damning, Ethan assured her. But she's using anything she can to paint you in a negative light. Financial struggles, unpaid bills. It's all meaningless, but she's framing it as proof that you're after my money. Cassie's face hardened. Of course she is. I've already taken steps to shut it down, Ethan said. But I wanted you to hear it from me first. Cassie sat down, her hands clasped tightly. Why does she hate me so much? It's not about you, Ethan said. It's about control. Victoria sees you as a threat to the power she's held over the board, and over me. Cassie met his gaze, her voice soft. And what about you, Ethan? How do you see me? Ethan leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. I see someone who's stronger than anyone gives her credit for. Someone who's changed the way I see the world.
The success of the first Sunnyside Open event breathed new life into Cassie's spirit. The overwhelming turnout and genuine engagement from the community were proof that she had found her footing. Yet beneath her sense of accomplishment lay a quiet fear, the growing realization that her arrangement with Ethan was becoming far more than just a business deal. For Ethan, the line between what was real and what was necessary had already blurred. Watching Cassie step into the spotlight, he found himself drawn not just to her courage, but to her authenticity, a quality so rare in his world that it felt like a revelation. But even as he navigated his own feelings, the shadow of Victoria's schemes loomed large. Victoria Sinclair was not one to admit defeat easily. Frustrated by Cassie's growing popularity and the public's shift toward her favor, Victoria decided to take a more direct approach. She arranged a meeting with Richard Cavendish, the board member most vocal about his doubts regarding Ethan's engagement. "We need to take control," Victoria said, leaning across the polished mahogany table in Richard's private office. "Ethan's actions are reckless. He's jeopardizing the reputation of Lancaster Enterprises." Richard regarded her coolly, his fingers steepled. "And what do you propose?" "Expose Cassie Daniels for who she really is," Victoria replied, her voice cold and calculating. "I've done some digging. There are pieces of her past that don't exactly align with the image she's projecting." Cassie's gaze softened, but uncertainty lingered in her eyes. "What if it's not enough? What if they don't listen?" Ethan reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. "They'll listen, because you have something they can't ignore. Truth. And if anyone tries to tear you down, they'll have to go through me." Cassie looked at him, her walls crumbling just a little more. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll do it." As Cassie and Maya's partnership grew stronger, Victoria's frustration boiled over. Her attempts to discredit Cassie had backfired, only drawing more attention to Sunnyside's successes. Desperate, she began digging deeper into Cassie's past, determined to find something, anything that could be used against her. What Victoria didn't realize was that her actions were drawing scrutiny of their own. Ethan had quietly launched an investigation into her dealings, determined to expose the depths of her manipulation. The first of Sunnyside's open events was a resounding success. Cassie led a workshop on financial literacy for single mothers, drawing from her own experiences to offer practical advice and encouragement. The room was packed, the atmosphere electric with hope and possibility. As Ethan watched from the back, he felt a swell of pride unlike anything he had ever known. This wasn't just about saving his company anymore. It was about standing beside someone who had found her own strength and purpose. After the event, Cassie found Ethan waiting for her outside. She smiled, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Did you see that? They actually listened." "I saw," Ethan said, his voice warm, "and I'm not surprised." Cassie hesitated, then stepped closer. "Thank you for believing in me." Ethan looked at her, his heart pounding. "Always." For a moment, the world fell away, leaving just the two of them. And as the distance between them closed, Ethan realized something he hadn't allowed himself to admit until now. This wasn't just an arrangement anymore. It was real, and he wasn't ready to let it go. He frowned. "I'm not expecting anyone. Who is it?" "She says her name is Maya Hamilton." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his surprise quickly replaced by curiosity. "Send her up." Moments later, Maya entered the room, her presence as commanding as ever. Dressed in her usual understated yet polished style, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew her worth. Ethan rose to greet her, his handshake firm but warm. "Maya," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "This is unexpected." Maya smiled faintly, though there was a trace of steel in her gaze. "We need to talk." As they sat across from each other, Maya wasted no time getting to the point. "I've been hearing things, Ethan, about the Sunnyside fundraiser, about Cassie." Ethan's expression darkened. "Let me guess. Victoria's behind it." "Partially," Maya admitted. "But this isn't just about her. People are questioning Cassie's intentions, and by extension, they're questioning your commitment to Sunnyside." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I've done everything I can to support Sunnyside. Cassie has poured her heart into this. How can anyone doubt that?" Maya's gaze softened. "Ethan, I'm not here to accuse you. I'm here because I care about Sunnyside and the community it serves. The truth is, your engagement has become a spectacle. People are focusing on the drama instead of the cause." Her words hit harder than Ethan expected. He had thought he was protecting Cassie by pushing back against the critics, but Maya was right. The focus had shifted, and not in a way that benefited anyone. So, what do you suggest? Ethan asked, his tone subdued. Maya leaned forward, her voice firm but kind. Refocus the narrative. Shift the spotlight back to the work being done at Sunnyside. And for that, you need Cassie to lead. Not as your fiancée, but as herself. That evening, Ethan returned to the estate, Maya's words still echoing in his mind. He found Cassie in the study, reading to Joshua, who was curled up beside her. The sight was a reminder of why he had agreed to this arrangement in the first place. Not for himself, but to protect what mattered most to her. When Joshua finally dozed off, Cassie looked up at Ethan, her expression curious. You're home early. I needed to talk to you, he said, sitting down across from her. Cassie nodded, sensing the seriousness in his tone. What's on your mind? Ethan hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Maya came to see me today. Cassie stiffened slightly. And? She's concerned, Ethan said, about the attention we've been getting, about how it's overshadowing the work at Sunnyside. Cassie frowned, her shoulders tensing. So what does she want us to do? Pretend this isn't happening? No, Ethan said quickly. She wants you to take the lead, to show people the real you, the person who stood on that stage and inspired an entire room. Hey, he said, sitting beside her. You've been quiet. Cassie didn't look at him. Just thinking. Ethan waited, sensing she needed time to gather her thoughts. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I knew this would be hard, she said, but I didn't think it would feel so lonely. You're not alone, Ethan said, his tone firm. I'm here. Cassie turned to him, her eyes glistening. Why? Why do you care so much? You could have picked someone who fit into your world, someone who wouldn't cause all this trouble. Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment he was silent. Then he said, Because I see you, Cassie. The real you. And I care about what happens to you. Not because of the company or my grandfather's will, but because you matter to me. The sincerity in his voice shook something loose inside her. For the first time, Cassie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't all a facade. But the road ahead was still uncertain, and the battles they faced would only grow fiercer. Together, they would have to navigate the storm, finding strength in each other as they fought to rewrite their story on their own terms. The buzz around the fundraiser had begun to settle, but the waves it created continued to ripple through Ethan's life. While Cassie faced relentless scrutiny in the press, Ethan wrestled with the deeper consequences of his choices, both for himself and for the people around him. One of those people, he realized, was Maya Hamilton. Ethan had been sitting in his office at Lancaster Tower when his assistant buzzed in. Mr. Lancaster, you have a visitor. Ethan folded his arms, his expression defiant. The fundraiser was a success. Cassie's speech resonated with everyone there. The only people stirring up trouble are the ones who want to see me fail. Richard's lips curled into a thin smile. Perception matters, Ethan. And right now the perception is that this engagement is nothing more than a convenient arrangement. Ethan's voice sharpened. You mean that's what Victoria wants you to believe? Richard didn't deny it. If this continues, we'll have no choice but to revisit your position as CEO. The threat hung in the air, but Ethan refused to back down. Cassie isn't the problem here. The problem is people like you and Victoria who can't stand the idea of someone challenging the status quo. Be careful, Ethan, Richard said, his voice low. Your loyalty to her could cost you everything. Meanwhile, Cassie returned to the Sunnyside Community Center to reconnect with the community and find solace in familiar faces. The center buzzed with activity, children playing, parents chatting, volunteers organizing donations. But Cassie felt a subtle shift in the way people looked at her. Some smiled warmly, while others regarded her with curiosity, their expressions tinged with doubt. The article's reach had extended further than she'd anticipated, and its implications weighed heavily on her. Cassie, a familiar voice called out. She turned to see Mrs. Alvarez, an older woman who had been a fixture at Sunnyside for years. The woman embraced her warmly, her presence a balm to Cassie's frayed nerves. Don't let them get to you, mija, Mrs. Alvarez said. People who know you, they know the truth. Cassie nodded, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. Thank you. That evening, Ethan found Cassie sitting on the steps of the estate's garden, her shoulders hunched as she gazed at the darkened horizon. He approached quietly, his usual confident stride softened by concern. But Cassie shook her head. No, Ethan. Let them talk. Fighting this will only add fuel to the fire. Cassie, this isn't fair, Olivia interjected. You shouldn't have to endure this. I know it's not fair, Cassie said, her voice steady, but I'm not going to let them see me break. If they want to paint me as the villain, fine, but I won't let them define who I am. Across town, Victoria Sinclair sat in her office, the glow of her computer screen illuminating her sharp features. She was reviewing the fallout from the article, her satisfaction evident. But she wasn't finished yet. Make sure the next piece dives deeper, she instructed her assistant over the phone. Find anyone from her past who's willing to talk. The more dirt we can dig up, the better. Victoria ended the call and leaned back in her chair, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. Ethan's engagement was a direct threat to her influence over the Lancaster board, and she intended to crush it before it could solidify. Later that afternoon, Ethan found himself in a tense meeting with key members of the Lancaster Enterprises board. Richard Cavendish, the unofficial leader of the skeptics, wasted no time in voicing his concerns. Ethan, this engagement of yours has become a liability, Richard said, his tone cold. The negative press is damaging the company's reputation. The day after the fundraiser dawned gray and overcast, the Miami skyline shrouded in a blanket of mist. It was as if the city itself anticipated the storm brewing beneath the surface. While the event had been a resounding success, its ripple effects were only beginning to unfold. Cassie awoke early, her mind still buzzing with the praise she had received and the pointed questions she had faced. She sat at the small writing desk in her room, staring at a blank notepad. Last night had been a victory, but it was also a reminder of the scrutiny she was under. In the kitchen, the sound of muffled voices reached her ears. Curious, she made her way downstairs where Ethan and Olivia stood by the kitchen island, their conversation tense. Have you seen the headlines? Olivia asked, sliding her phone across the counter to Ethan. He picked it up, his brow furrowing as he read the headline. Is Ethan Lancaster's engagement a sham? Insiders spill secrets about Cassie Daniels. Ethan's jaw tightened, and he scrolled through the article. It was filled with half-truths and outright lies, painting Cassie as a social climber who had manipulated her way into his life. This is Victoria's doing, he said, his voice low and furious. She won't stop until she destroys Cassie. Olivia nodded grimly. She's relentless, Ethan. But this is different. She's feeding the narrative that you're using Cassie to keep the company, and that Cassie's using you for wealth. It's damaging, and it's gaining traction. Cassie stepped into the room, her presence unnoticed until she spoke. Let me see it. Ethan and Olivia turned, their expressions a mixture of guilt and concern. Ethan hesitated, but Cassie's steady gaze left him no choice. He handed her the phone. As Cassie read the article, her face remained neutral, though her hands trembled slightly. When she finished, she set the phone down with a sigh. So, this is how they want to play it. I'll handle this, Ethan said, his tone firm. I'll call the editor and shut this down. The reporter opened their mouth to argue, but Ethan's glare silenced them. He turned to Cassie, his voice softening. You don't have to answer that. But Cassie shook her head, stepping forward. No, it's okay. She faced the reporter, her gaze steady. I won't deny that this relationship started in an unconventional way, she said. But what you see here today, that's real. The work we're doing, the lives we're impacting, that's what matters. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're asking the wrong questions. Her words drew murmurs of approval from the crowd, and the reporter retreated, looking chastened. Ethan glanced at her, his admiration evident. You handled that better than I would have. Cassie smiled faintly. It's not my first time being underestimated. As the fundraiser wound down, Cassie found herself alone on the balcony overlooking the city. The night was cool, the distant hum of traffic a soothing backdrop to her swirling thoughts. She had faced her fears and come out stronger, but the journey wasn't over. Ethan joined her, his presence a comforting weight beside her. You were incredible today, he said. Thanks, Cassie replied, her voice soft. I still can't believe it's over. It's not, Ethan said. This is just the beginning. Cassie turned to him, her expression thoughtful. Why are you doing all this? Really? Ethan hesitated, his usual confidence faltering. At first it was about the company, about keeping what I've built. But now, he looked at her, his eyes searching hers. Now it's about you. Cassie's breath caught, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment the world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them standing on the edge of something new, something terrifying and beautiful. And though neither of them said it, they both knew the truth. This wasn't just a partnership anymore. It was something much deeper, something that would change them both forever. She spoke about Sunnyside's role in her own life, the times when it had provided her with meals, support, and a sense of belonging during her darkest days. She spoke of the families it had uplifted, the children it had inspired, and the dreams it had made possible. We live in a world that often measures worth by status or wealth, she said, her gaze sweeping the room. But I believe true worth comes from how we treat each other, how we lift each other up. Sunnyside is a place where that worth is celebrated every single day. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, her passion igniting the room. She ended with a simple yet powerful message. This isn't just about saving a building. It's about saving a legacy of hope, love, and resilience. And I believe that together, we can make that legacy thrive. The applause was thunderous. Cassie stood there, her chest heaving, as the weight of the moment sank in. She had done it. She had taken the narrative and rewritten it on her terms. But not everyone in the room was pleased. Victoria Sinclair stood at the back, her expression dark as she watched the crowd rally around Cassie. She had underestimated her, something she rarely did, and the realization burned. After Cassie stepped off the stage, Victoria made her move. Approaching one of the reporters, she whispered something into their ear, her eyes glinting with malice. She was determined to undermine Cassie's victory, even if it meant playing dirty. As Cassie mingled with the crowd, basking in the warmth of their praise, a reporter approached her with a pointed question. Ms. Daniels, how do you respond to claims that your relationship with Mr. Lancaster is nothing more than a calculated move to secure his inheritance? The words hit Cassie like a slap. Around her, the room seemed to hush, all eyes turning toward her. Before she could respond, Ethan appeared at her side, his expression thunderous. That's enough, he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Cassie has made her intentions clear, and anyone who questions her integrity should look at the work she's done here today. For Cassie, the stakes had never felt higher. This was her chance to change the narrative, to prove to herself and the world that she was more than the labels they had thrust upon her. Maid, opportunist, anomaly. Ethan had stayed up late the previous night, going over every detail to ensure the event would be flawless. He had arranged for the media to cover the fundraiser, not to exploit Cassie, but to showcase her authenticity in the cause she believed in. He knew this wasn't just about saving his inheritance anymore. It was about standing by Cassie as she faced a storm she never asked for. As the event began, Cassie stood in the green room, adjusting the hem of her simple yet elegant navy dress. Her palms were clammy, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent days preparing her speech, rehearsing until her voice grew hoarse. But now, as the moment approached, doubt began to creep in. Ethan entered the room, his usual calm demeanor a steadying force. You ready? He asked, his eyes searching hers. No, Cassie admitted with a small laugh, but I'll survive. You'll do more than survive, Ethan said firmly. You'll own that stage. Cassie looked at him, her expression softening. You have a lot of faith in me. Because I've seen what you can do, Ethan replied, and so will they. Cassie nodded, drawing strength from his words. Okay, let's do this. The venue was packed with a mix of community members, media, and influential figures from Ethan's world. At the front of the room was a stage adorned with a backdrop featuring images of Sunnyside Community Center and its programs, a vivid reminder of what was at stake. When Cassie stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She stood at the podium, the bright lights casting her in sharp relief against the sea of faces. For a moment she hesitated, her carefully rehearsed words slipping from her grasp. But then she caught sight of Joshua, her 7-year-old son, sitting in the front row beside Olivia. His smile was all the encouragement she needed. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "My name is Cassie Daniels, and I'm here today not as someone extraordinary, but as someone who believes in the power of community." For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, the city stretching out before them. Ethan's hand brushed against hers, and neither of them pulled away. "Cassie," he said quietly, his voice tinged with something she couldn't quite place. "No matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know I'm proud of you." Cassie's breath hitched, her walls cracking under the weight of his sincerity. "Thank you," she whispered. And as the night deepened, they sat together, the storm of the world temporarily held at bay. But both of them knew the battle wasn't over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and their partnership would be tested like never before. Morning of the fundraiser dawned bright and clear, as if the universe had decided to grant Cassie a small mercy. The event was to be held at a sprawling venue in Miami's Art District, chosen by Olivia for its charm and proximity to Sunnyside Community Center. The theme was A Future Together, a message of hope and collaboration that resonated with the community's struggles and dreams.